Hi, I'm Nick. Full name is Nicholas Gavin Palmer Brown. I was born October 28th, 1984, and later this year I turned 40. I've never done social media. I'm not a self-promoter. I don't like talking about myself, and I've never wanted to gain attention for myself or for my ideas. But I have to change that because I have really good ideas, and I have solutions that others aren't talking about as articulately as I can. I have a unique set of skills, a unique set of experiences that I bring to the table, and I have to embrace that. So I'm going to share myself with you today. I'm going to make myself vulnerable, and I'm going to do this once so that I don't have to do this again, because I really don't enjoy talking to myself. I try to have as little or no ego as possible, and I try and be as humble as possible in the way that I live. So yeah, this is awkward for me. So please treat me kindly in the comments. Why am I doing this video? Most importantly, it is to establish trust, and so that you know who you're talking about, so that you can get to know me. I'm shy, I've avoided attention, I've avoided the spotlight, but I want to build trust with you, so I'm making myself vulnerable, I'm sharing my story, and I'm going to come at you with a place of trust, so treat me kindly. And I hope to get to know all of you more over time. So who is Nick Brown? I'm a nerd. I'm a disaster responder. I'm an innovator. I'm a social entrepreneur. You can read more about me on my LinkedIn profile at Nick in Paradise. I came up with that handle, I think, 17 years ago when I was first in the Philippines, and I have lived in paradise most of my life. I lived in some of the most beautiful places. I've traveled to more than 50 countries, and I've studied a lot. I love to learn. I've read the best books, watched the best documentaries, listened to the best podcasts, enjoyed the best content creators like Mr. Beast, to Yes Theory and Veritasm, and so many more. I've enjoyed the best movies, musics, gaming, and entertainment. I've experimented with the best tools and technologies, best pieces of software. I've learned about the best projects in the world, the best organizations. I've always had a fascination with the best, the optimal, the most effective, the most efficient. I have somewhat of the engineering mindset that Mark Rober so articulately describes, but my mindset is very much on solving problems and how can I best serve the planet and humanity one small step at a time. And I come at everything that I share from a rather unique perspective. I was born in Canada, in Toronto, but I've spent most of the last 17 years at the base of the socioeconomic pyramid, spending time living next door in communities in developing countries, in particular in tropical developing countries, and on islands and in mountains, because I love nature. I'm so happy when I live in nature and grow my own food. When all of this is done, I want nothing more than to retire on a patch of land and farm and garden for the rest of my life and raise my kids and my grandkids. So I come from that unique perspective of seeing how the world really works from the base, from where the poorest of the poor, the most challenged of the challenged, and seeing how they live every day, seeing their immense capacity, their immense value that is unrecognized, but also learning from the top of the socioeconomic pyramid, the best minds in the world. They write books, make podcasts, produce courses, and I've consumed that content, taken MOOCs and online courses, and I love to learn. And now with AI, I can learn anything really quickly. And I love learning. So I come from leadership, from a servant leadership perspective. I have a desire to be useful, a desire to learn, a desire to improve, a desire to be more disciplined. And now that I'm a father, I feel like I've been called to lead and teach by example, to share my story, my ideas, my life, my family, my children, because I love my life, I love my family, I love my little girls, and I try to raise them as best as I can, as any parent does. But I have the unique opportunity of having learned from some of the best minds in how to raise my children, and they are so happy and loved. And I do a lot of things differently than what mainstream North American and European literature says. Because I learned from indigenous people and people at the base of the socioeconomic pyramid about how to raise happy children without needing a lot of money. And I'd like to share that because my daughters are amazing. My elder daughter turns 25 months in a couple of days, and she is so incredibly bright. When I bring groceries home, she unpacks them and puts them in the fridge. She signs, she speaks. She is a great big sister to her little 4-month-old sister. She shares. She was climbing into a tree house before she could walk. And I'd love to kind of share that, because one thing that I've learned in developing countries is there's not a lot of role models there for the developing world, in part because of the brain drain and in part for a lot of other reasons. And the whole world needs more role models. So I'm going to put myself out there and try and be a good role model as we all go through this journey together. So let me tell you my story. I was born in Toronto, Canada. My dad's British, my mom's Danish. They got divorced when I was 4. I grew up in East York area. I went to Bennington. I went to Brown School, then Bennington, GA Brown, Metro Prep. Went to a bunch of schools in Toronto. Spent a year in Elora, Ontario. Moved back to Toronto. My mom was a genius. She was a member of Mensa. But she struggled with mental health issues when I was growing up, and I left home at 13, and I went to go live with my dad in Aurelia, and I learned what small town life is like and how different that was from the multiculturalism of Toronto, where Toronto is the most multicultural city in the world. When I was growing up, no one identified themselves as white or Caucasian. They were Greek or Armenian or Israeli or Indian or Filipino, Ecuadorian or Guyanese. They were, we were all from different countries. I'm a first generation immigrant. My dad came in his 20s to Canada. And I got my first computer at around 8 years old. I was on the internet with a 28.8 and then a 56.6. I used DOS. I started to play online MUDs, multi-user dungeons, text-based video games in the very early days. And I've been a nerd ever since, loving technology. And I was identified as gifted and put into an education system designed to enrich me, but I didn't have social skills. I had a struggle growing up. I was bright, but I didn't have the empathy because I grew up in a single family home, and I didn't get the support and attention that I could have used to help me thrive more. So I had a challenging childhood. Left home at 13, and went to university at 16. I skipped a couple of grades and accelerated. And my university experience was amazing at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario. I had some amazing professors. Special shout outs to Professor Wright and Professor Menzies. Brock was an amazing experience for me. I got very involved in the student union, and I almost never went to class. Because I could learn everything from the textbooks. I would just read the textbooks and take the exams, do the assignments and hand them in. I learned far more in university by not attending classes and being involved with various clubs and organizations than I ever did in the classroom. I got involved with the student union. I got elected 7 times to represent the student body of 17,000. I was the vice president of the student union. I was on the board of the student union, which is a $7 million organization, nonprofit at 18. I was on the board of the university by 19, $140 million organization, CAD, not USD. And I learned how to, like, a board of directors operates, and how do you manage money, and how to, like, we used to joke that, every time that board of trustees got together, there was, well more than $100 million of net worth sitting in that room, probably close to $1 billion. And so I got, world-class exposure to university senate and board of trustees and how education is administrated. I got exposed to the Bob Rae Review on Higher Education and Public Policy. I was involved with the Canadian Alliance of Student Associate, CASA, and USA, the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. And I just learned so much. But I also learned that politics sucks. The seventh time that I got elected for the president of the student union, but there was some controversy in the election, and I was disbarred from the election, and then overturned, and I won the election. But my advisors, my mentors, much older than I, they counseled me to resign and do another election so that everyone was transparent. But then the next election became an election about the election, and everyone was judging me and thinking wrong thoughts about me. And I was like, holy crap, I'm never going to do politics again. Why would I ever want to put myself through being in the public eye like that? So I've never wanted attention ever again since then. So please, in the comments and as we go through this process, be nice to me. And after university, I got a grant from the government to pay 2/3 of my salary. Well, first, actually, I went to England, to London. I lived in the UK for a year. I bartended. I traveled Europe because I didn't want to get a real job. And I worked in bars in Camden Town, on Inverness Street with Polish immigrants and all sorts of people. Had a wonderful experience. But then I moved back to Canada and I got a real job. I started in the sustainable business sector. I got a grant from the government to pay 2/3 of my salary for a year if I went into sustainable business somehow. And so I looked for the best company in Toronto that was doing sustainability, the coolest one, and I found Innovest Strategic Value Advisors. I got hired as a junior position. And within a year, I was a director of research there. They were acquired by Riskmetrics, which was the #1 risk analysis firm in the world, and I became the global head of sustainability analytics in my early 20s, basically managing all the ESG data on all the companies in the world, all their human rights violations, all their ESG performance, all their sustainability performance, looking at their alpha, looking at their beta, looking at their reputational risk, looking at these things from different perspectives, from compliance to the UN Global Compact. I was doing big data analytics before I even knew that it was called big data analytics, and I was looking at sustainability factors. And I loved it. I loved it so much, and I got sent to the Philippines as part of that. But then MSCI, Morgan Stanley Capital International, acquired Riskmetrics, and the culture was going to change, and they wanted me to move to New York, and I had fallen in love with the Philippines where they had sent me. And I stayed in the Philippines. So Riskmetrics sent me to the Philippines. I'd never lived in a developing country before, although I had visited them. And I fell in love with the people, I fell in love with the environment, and I fell in love with the economics of living in the Philippines. Because I could hire world-class people for $500, $1,000, $1,500, who were doing the work of what could get done in New York and London for $6,000, $8,000, $10,000. In fact, when I first saw the spreadsheet of the cost differences between my old team in Toronto and London and New York versus the cost difference of the team that I inherited in Washington, D.C., New York, and the Philippines, it blew my mind, the cost differences. It was like 7-1. So I convinced my bosses to send me to the Philippines, and it was one of the best things I ever did. And I saved the company $1 million a year in headcount costs. Got like a $20,000 bonus for that, and really got jaded. And because they managed their business on headcount, and Filipinos were headcount, even though they were cheap headcount. And yeah, so I decided to stay in the Philippines. I started my own company doing ESG analytics in the back office. Rolled that down after a little while, worked with RepRisk for a little while. And then I decided that, holy shit, I'd spent much of my early professional career learning about sustainability science from a corporate perspective. But I didn't know how to grow my own food. I didn't know how to build my own house. I didn't know a lot. And I had this kind of crisis of like, what am I doing flying around to conferences around the world, staying in the Shangri-La, talking about sustainability, meeting with people like BlackRock to talk about ESG and reputational risk. And I couldn't grow my own food. I didn't know how to garden. So I found permaculture. I studied natural farming, regenerative agriculture, permaculture design. I did a yoga teacher training. I studied Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs of union in English. I studied under some very traditional teachers, Clayton Horton, Morza Reina, both certified by Guruji in India, and learned the real traditional way, the disciplined way of practicing Ashtanga yoga that came from many years. And I studied permaculture design. I took 3 online permaculture design courses. I read every book I could on permaculture, and then I went to practice it. I moved to the mountains of Palawan to an eco village, and I lived permaculture for a year. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Living in a mud house with solar panels, growing my own food. It was amazing. And I loved it. And then in 2013, Super Typhoon Yolanda hit, internationally Super Typhoon Haiyan, and more than 1 million homes were destroyed. And I had been scheduled to teach a permaculture design course in Maya Earth Village, and I was like, you know what? I got skills and talents and knowledge that are more useful than doing a small little PDC for a bunch of old ladies that want to do some backyard gardening, and rich old ladies, I should say. And so I went into the response. We gathered a bunch of permaculture people from around the world. We put together some programming, and we went in not knowing really what we were doing, but we went and we helped. I had a great experience working with Bolts from the Cebu provincial government, and I eventually found myself on Bantayan Island as the executive director of Young Pioneer Disaster Response, a group that hadn't existed before Typhoon Yolanda. They sprung out of nowhere from around the world. We brought more than 200 volunteers in. We helped build more than 1,400 houses. We ran livelihood programming, reef rehabilitation programming. There's still a bamboo factory on the island that we helped start. And that was my first real professional experience of disaster response. And I had so many ideas for how we could do it better. We came up with a concept called Base Camp Bantayan, a replicable concept for sustainable disaster response. The ideas of permaculture, of Project Union and Base Camp Union owe direct lineage or support from the people involved in YPDR and that response. Yeah, I got into disaster response. I learned a lot and be given my knowledge. I had so many ideas, but I didn't have funding. I didn't have credibility. I didn't have network. And we did the best that we could. We ran for 2 or 3 years, and then we all have gone off and done other things. Many of us joined the Typhoon Masak response with IOM under USAID and FEMA. In Micronesia, I acted as the information management officer. Eventually, and then I worked with an NGO called Engage Spark, a social venture called Engage Spark that did automated SMS and IVR around the world for humanitarian purposes and development purposes. And then I had an amazing experience. I went to Afghanistan with the United Nations for well over a year, close to 2 years. And I helped run the information management unit there, where I had this amazing team of Afghans that helped to build the government systems, the counter-trafficking in-person system, national disaster management information system, etc., border returnee information system. And I learned a lot, again, about how things work. I learned about how the UN worked, so much. And then most recently, so then from the UN, I moved to Cambodia, spent a year in Cambodia. I eventually moved to Nicaragua during COVID, for a variety of reasons. Lived in San Juan del Sur and Ometepe Island. I worked remotely there for a Canadian cryptocurrency exchange as their head of fraud investigations and senior operations manager. So I learned all about blockchain and cryptocurrency. I did a cryptocurrency fraud recovery where I recovered, I think, over 50, nearly 60% of the funds. I think there was something like $3 million that disappeared, and I brought back like 1.6 million or something like that. Those aren't the full, like, I don't remember the exact numbers, don't hold me to it, but I learned a lot. I got to apply some of the open source the OSINT skills that I had learned back in my ESG days of discovering everything about the corporate companies that we used to cover. And then when ChatGPT was released in November, a year and a half ago, I was like, holy shit, we're here with AI, and we can really change the world now. And I realized that I could do 100x work on some of the tasks that I used to do. I could write project proposals in minutes. I could ideate in ways that I could never have. And I was able to take my consciousness combined with AI and many different tools, and I was able to do so much thinking, so much ideation. And I've been working for a year and a half with AI and about AI in education. I held a conference in Guyana around the first ever Caribbean AI for Education conference. And I came up with the idea for the Caribbean Intelligence Institute, which I've shared in another video. And along the way, I forgot to mention, I was a country manager for the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team in the Philippines. I got the pleasure of shooting a documentary with Amazon's Chief Technology Officer, Werner Vogels, for Amazon Prime. Amazing documentary experience for me. I learned a lot. I got to hang out with the number one guy in tech for 3 days, ask him about AI and the singularity, and we had some great conversations. Unfortunately, that documentary was not very well edited, and after it was, I was no longer with Hot when it was released, and after a little while, it got taken down on Amazon Prime for good reason, because they made mistakes like putting the Filipino flag upside down in the editing, and there was just no local content, and it looked like a white guy savior thing, which was not at all what anyone wanted to create, because in the Philippines, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team and the OpenStreetMap community, they're all Filipino. I just happened to be the one white guy involved as the country manager, and the story just wasn't told right. Anyway, but that brings us today. There's a lot of people that I want to thank from along the way. They're just, I have learned from the best minds in the world. I have a different perspective. I come from a unique family. I didn't tell you about my dad. My dad's an amazing man. He went to Marlborough and then Cambridge. He moved to Canada in his 20s and worked for the CNE, became head of the Harbour Commission and managed the Toronto Port Authority and the Island Airport and CNE. From there, he moved to Orillia in Northern Ontario, became the city manager there, where he worked on projects like the Trails for Life initiative. Now retired, he works on the Mariposa Folk Festival every year. And my dad's an amazing man. I got two grandfathers that were amazing. They were war heroes, both of them. My father's father, my grandfather, he was captain of the English cricket team, so I got some English cricket blood in me. He was chairman of the MCC. He was awarded the OBE for service to, OBE and then CBE. I don't know. You got a couple of awards from the Queen for his service in the war and his service to cricket. So I've got this great ancestry. My great-great-grandfather became a lord when he founded Huntley and Palmer's Biscuit Company. So I still have some blood relatives in the House of Lords, although I don't really know them. It's just part of my heritage and my story. But my grandmother, the Honorary Marjorie Palmer, who became then later Brown when she married my grandfather, Marjorie Palmer was the eldest girl of Lord Palmer, the second Lord Palmer, but she was a woman, so she didn't inherit the title. And so the title went in a different direction in the family, and that's the way it worked in the British Commonwealth. And now my wife is Filipino. My first daughter was born in Nicaragua. My second daughter was born in Costa Rica. My dad's dad was actually born in Peru into a British family back in the early 1900s. So we got like 7 passports in my family. I'm a global citizen. I haven't lived in Canada for 17 years. And I want to serve. I want to help. I want nothing more than to make my skills, my knowledge freely and publicly available to everyone. I want to educate. I feel like I am called to serve, to lead, to teach, and I'm offering myself to all of you to do that. And I hope that you will support me and guide me. And so I'd like to end by thanking all the places that I've lived, all the peoples that I've met along the way. Thank you for teaching me. I've learned more from farmers and fishermen and indigenous people and people at the very, very base of the socioeconomic pyramid than I ever did from most of my teachers and university professors. So thank you for the education that I've got. I hope to be able to share it. I hope to be able to share my view of unity with the world. I believe that we are all the same. And I hope this Project Union, this idea of a one Caribbean response, a one UN response, a digitally enabled disaster 2.0 response in such a small area has the ability to grow. And I will continue to try and establish trust with you and let you get to know me and demonstrate with all of my actions that I am transparent and that I want to do things right and properly, and that I'm here to serve the people and get the job done, and that I'm just here to help, that I have no interest in wealth or accumulating money or fame or reputation or attention. And I want to share as much of that attention with everyone else and hide as much as possible from the public eye as we just get the job done. But it is what it is, and I'm called to do what I must, and so I will do more videos like this, and I will be more public, and I will host AMAs. I will host press briefings and press conferences, and I will continue the conversation. Let's get talking. I'll share more about myself in the future. Until then, ask me anything. I'm an open book. I hope you'll join Project Union and support these initiatives and support me, knowing that I know that I'm flawed, knowing that I know that I don't know what I don't know, and that I will apply self-regulation and external feedback in order to improve. I'm here to work for you. And let me help you. Thank you, everyone.